Talking to Peter Cameron, BF Saul. Good morning, Peter.
How you doing? Good morning.
I'm doing great. We just were talking a little bit offline before that. Just come back from a big rugby tournament at the Golden Age. How old are you?
At the old Golden Age of 39.
Yeah, 39. Okay, so your body's coming back wrecked, and
really wrecked. But I have to keep playing because I want to say that I'm the 4-decade player.
Yeah, right. Well, you only got one more year for that.
Exactly.
Well, let me tell you, I'm familiar with your company. You work for a wonderful company. Frank Saul is a legendary businessman in Washington business circles and a major charitable philanthropist, although few know it. And you do work for a very solid company. I'd just like to know, before we actually get into the interview, kind of where you came from. Our viewers always like to know, and how you got in the business, and generally your market area. So why don't we start there?
Well, how I got into the business?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Where'd you go? Are you a local guy? Where'd you go to school?
No, actually, I'm from New Jersey. Born in the Bronx. Lived most of my life in New Jersey. And when I was, I guess, a senior in high school, I was going to be going to University of Delaware. I was going to be wrestling there, and I wanted to take a trip down and see some, Virginia schools and North Carolina schools. And I went to James Madison and literally stood on the campus and just said, "This is it."
Oh yeah, wonderful school.
It was just I don't know, it was just something about it. I just had a gut feeling about it, and I actually I had arrangements to go to Delaware. I had to pull everything out of there, and literally at the last minute switch to go to Madison, and pretty much, loved Madison. Had the degree that I wanted. Had a degree in international finance, and wanted to, eventually work in the finance area, but I actually wanted to work internationally. And after college, the first thing that I did was I actually went to the West Coast and worked for the Olympics in '84, and went out there with 7 buddies and stayed out there about a year and a half.
What'd you do? Was that Peter Ueberroth? Yeah,
Peter Ueberroth. He was actually 2 up the line from me. My best friend was actually 3 up the line. My best friend was one of their top managers, and his boss was his dad's best friend. So that's how kind of we all got out there, and we did logistics, and basically everything that went in. They had 3 campuses. Everything that went into the USC campus, we put there. Anywhere from beds to clocks to the Germans beer and the Italians pasta.
I wonder if that discipline actually helped you in your business later.
Well, I tell you, the biggest thing that I got out of that job, which, literally, is this business, is being able to make a decision on your feet. Be able to decipher through everything and come up with a decision and literally go with it. I mean, you're out there, when the Olympics started, all the planning, I had been there almost a year before the Olympics, just doing all the planning stage, and and it all came to fruition. Well, when opening day happened, well, there was just 2 weeks for the Olympics, and it was really intense. I mean, things came up, and you just had to make decisions and go with them. Just day-to-day decisions, but it taught you to make decisions real quick. But when I was done with that experience, we came back to the East Coast, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and I landed a job at this exporting company. Well, actually, it was an import-export, and they built overseas housing projects. They had a couple contracts with different governments around the world, and I liked the real estate aspect of it, and I was doing financial work, and I talked to a buddy of mine. I said, I really like what I'm doing. I wanted to work with numbers. I said, but I'm getting a salary, And I said, I don't think I'm a salary guy. He said, how about mortgage banking? Literally. I mean, that's exactly what he said. And I said, what's that? I'm a young guy. I'm going, I have no idea. What are you talking about? So he set me up with an interview with BF Saul, with a lady by the name of Linda Lawson.
Yeah, and I know her well.
Yeah, she's a legend in the business.
Well, she used to work for Guarantee Mortgage, and I was their executive VP many years ago. But it's funny. It's a long string.
Well, it was kind of funny because she wouldn't interview me. She heard that I was from New Jersey, and she was picturing a guy coming in, yo, what's up, with my shirt down, chains hanging everywhere. I mean, this is what she told me. She goes, I had a envision of you, and I couldn't get her to interview me. So finally, she said, look, I got her on the phone one day, and she said, look, I'm not taking any new greenhorns on. Go get some experience, call me back. So I went over to Maryland, literally, I was in Virginia, but I went to Maryland and worked for a bank called Suburban Financial Services, and got 6 months of experience. Called her back and I said, all right, I got 6 months of experience. Can I get an interview? So finally, I wore down and we got an interview going, and she hired me on the spot and started, back in 1986 with them.
Well, when you started, did you start you're in the Virginia office, right, out near Reston, if I remember?
Yeah, I actually started, that's where her headquarters was. We had just opened up a branch in Reston, in Manassas, and the manager there was a lady by the name of Lisa White-Gestrel. And she just started the branch, and I was her first loan officer, and she was phenomenal. She actually works for me now. She took like 7 or 8 years off, raising her kids, and she came back last year, and she's hitting the builder business for us. So it's kind of interesting how things have worked out.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you started off, now are you running that office, or?
Yeah.
And how many loan officers do you have working for you now?
Right now we've got 22.
22 employees or loan officers?
Loan officers.
Wow.
Employees, we have close to 45.
Mm-hmm.
We also have a satellite office in Tysons. Last year we did, between the two offices, this office did over $400 million, and the Tysons office brought in about 65, 70. I think total we were around 475, 480, somewhere right in there.
Mm-hmm. For the offices you run?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you, let's go back to kind of the early days, and I don't want to necessarily relive them as much as draw some lessons out from them for the listeners out there who are primarily loan officers, some with a little experience, some with many years experience. When you started off, were you going after realtors, builders? Who did you go after, and more importantly, how'd you do it?
Well, it's kind of interesting because my manager actually was a builder. She was basically a builder rep, and that's all she did. And I kind of liked her style. It was kind of funny. She came in at 10 and left at 3, and I still joke with her about it this day.
I want one of those jobs.
Yeah, I know. She had some great builders that just loved her, and she was able to control the situation as far as when she met customers. But I was strictly going off after agents. I've always believed that's the bread and butter of the business. I'm very comfortable with that part of it. That's why eventually here I've opened up a builder division, because I see the other side of it. We have a real successful operation here, but when I was going after real estate agents, you just the biggest thing you have to be is consistent. Whatever you do, just be very, very consistent about it. And if you don't know something, say, hey, that's a great question. Would you mind if I made a quick phone call so I can get the answer? That's the key. Don't sit there and try to, work through it if you don't really know what's going on. Especially when you start out, there's just so much to know and so much to learn. It sort of is overwhelming in the beginning. And I think I really believe having a good manager that has an open door policy, and that you're able to bend the ear at any moment, was very important. But I think a couple of things that she did shaped my career, which I have sort of passed on to my loan officers.
But you still do about $60 million a year. I know you're a real heavy producer, which we'll get into a little later, how you manage both of them. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and that's always the constant struggle. I actually throttle back the production. I know I could easily throttle it up to $100 million, but then I take away from the management aspect, and I do enjoy the management aspect a lot. It's just a lot of fun, and I think that's one of the things is going into the business, if you're going to do it, make sure you enjoy it. I believe any job that you do, if you're not enjoying yourself, then get out, go do something else. You've got to have fun every day. You've got to make it exciting. No job is totally exciting, but you have to make it exciting, and that's part of what I've always tried to do is just, hey man, let's have fun every day. Let's go in there, let's have fun, let's enjoy it. And then people will work with you. People want to work with winners, and they want to work with people that are having fun, because it passes right on to their customers. And to me, that's just the way that's what business should be across the board.
You want to hear something interesting? I think our listeners will find kind of interesting too. I have always said, and that in an interview, most of the interviews I do, there's always one new thing that kind of comes up, which I think is kind of the value added of listening to more than one person. Do you know, of all the interviews I've done, I've done probably 60 of them, all top-level producers at your level. Do you know you're the first person that has brought up this concept of having fun while you work? The very first one, which I find kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Kind of really compelling, because I think that it's important.
I think it is so important, not only from a business aspect, from the health aspect also. You know, I mean, you've got to feel good about what you do. You got to feel positive about it. And my theory has always been, if I'm having fun, if I'm happy, and I'm doing a good job, of course, you know, you always got to go back to the basics. But as long as I'm doing a good job, the business is going to be there. I mean, there's no way it's not. It's just infectious. People will literally follow you if that's the attitude you take into it. And I did, you know, this just doesn't come, you know, from day one. I wasn't, you know, right out of the gates like that. I mean, I always had that in my mind. Where I think it really sunk in, and I got a lesson learned very early in my career. There was this top broker. His name is Ken Bennett. He's down in Florida someplace now. He's a real successful guy. And I knew I would hit it off with him, you know, and I really wanted his business, but I wanted his whole office's business. So what I would do is, the first way that I started getting his attention was every time I walked in his office, I would before I went in there, I'd call my processor and say, look, start paging me about every 5 minutes. So I'd walk in the office, you know, 5 minutes, my pager would go off. And then, you know, every 5 minutes the pager would keep going off. And he, you know, after a while, when I kept going in there, he goes, man, your pager's always going off. I said, oh yeah, you know, busy people, you love to work with them.
I'm going to send him a copy of this.
You know. Oh, well, no, I mean, I told him years later.
Oh.
So, you know, we started to become really, really good friends. Not just, you know, that's what I mean, when you have fun, you know, you can also, it translates into having friends in the business. And him and I became really, really close friends. And I'd been in there one day, and I was putting something in somebody's box. I had just had an approval, and I was putting an approval in an agent's box. And another agent came by and said, hey, how you doing today? And I said, okay. And we chit-chatted for a little bit, and I was going to walk out. And Ken said, and Ken is like 6'8", and he's about 300 pounds. And he goes, Pete, come here. And I kind of went over there, and he goes, close the door. And I'm like, it's kind of interesting. We're pretty good friends. Why does he want me to close the door? So I close the door. He goes, have a seat. And so I sit down. And he says, you know, he said, every time you come in here, he said, you're so happy, you're smiling. He said, you're always bringing my agents up. But if I ever hear you say again that you're just okay, don't come in here. Now keep in mind, I'm really good friends with this guy now, and I'm looking at him, and he said, I don't need that. I don't need just okay. I need you to lift my agents up. I need you to give them a boost. And that's why I like having you in here. And I just looked at him. I said, man, I said, I take that to heart. You know, that's great advice.
Yeah, fabulous advice.
I mean, I walked out of there and I went, wow.
That's $1 million advice.
Yeah, I mean, and it you know, I knew what my attitude always wanted to be. You know, I was always trying to be happy when I went in there, but then he put it totally in perspective. And, you know, sometimes you're going to have an off day, and that's okay not to go in someplace just because you're having an off day. You can't be, you know, 100% of the time up, but when you're on, you need to be in there. You know, when you're feeling all the vibes, you got to get in there. When you're not, it's okay not to go in there. And it was just great advice, and I've tried to carry that through, you know, my whole career. And of course, my loan officers hear that story all the time. So I always bring back the old stories.
But I think there's a good lesson in there. There's been a couple of good lessons in this interview already, and I think that whole idea of and I think it resonates with the loan officers out there, because everybody, including myself, you know, you have these down days where you don't want to get out of bed, and let alone, you know, calling a realtor office. And probably the best advice is just don't go in that day.
That's exactly right. I mean, you know, and you've got to surround yourself with winners. I mean, people want to work with winners, and I've been so fortunate to have just worked with total winners. And I look around my office now, winners. I just look at the rugby tournament we went up to. I was surrounded by winners. I mean, and it's infectious. You know, if somebody's winning, you're going to go along with them. I mean, everybody gets lifted at the same time, and trying to get that team is real important. And when that starts happening, synergy starts happening, and it spreads like like no tomorrow.
Let's get back to when you were starting calling on loan officers. What were some of the things that you did that you thought helped make you an established loan officer out there?
Well, one of the things that I try to do is mix it up. I never believed in putting rate sheets out there and doing the same thing other loan officers were doing. I tried to vary my times when I went to see people. I made appointments. I took it from a very professional standpoint instead of just willy-nilly walking into a real estate office. I mean, you can't, I don't like when people walk in my office and don't make an appointment with me. And I'm very busy. I still see them, but they definitely didn't gain anything out of it. If we make it an appointment, it's mutually acceptable. It's very comforting. Hey, I know you're coming in at 3. Great. Boom. I've slotted the time. And I try to do that from the start, and I think just doing that, I mean, it sounds kind of crazy, but literally separate yourself from half of the field.
Well, there is, if I can be a devil's advocate for a minute, there is another side to this where there's a school of thought where FaceTime by itself has value, and you're saying that that's not entirely true.
You mean just walking into a real estate office? Well, the way I would accomplish that, I had FaceTime. When I went into real estate offices that I did not have an appointment, I always had a reason.
Okay.
So I did not, I'm saying, I'm not saying that I didn't go in real estate offices. What I did was I made it a purpose. So if I was going to walk in there and really the only thing I wanted to do is get my rates out, I would go in there with a marketing piece, maybe a cube, maybe a pen, something from the marketing department, or, something that was a need benefit type of flyer, where you had a purpose to go in instead of just going in for FaceTime. And I made sure that my name was plastered everywhere. I mean, you looked on their desk, you saw a cube. They were writing, it's probably with one of my pens. Really neat flyers in different situations, 100% financing, whatever. Make them interesting, but have a purpose when you walk in there. Because somebody's going to ask you the question, first question is always, what are your rates? You have to prepare. And when I tell loan officers when they walk in offices, prepare your answers. Understand what they're going to ask you, but understand what you're trying to get to is their customer. So you have to, it's a fine line between, going in there selling money, but also trying to establish a relationship. You're trying to do both at the same time. And then not only do you have to sell them, but then you have to sell their customer. So it is a fine line, but you have to start the groundwork. It's got to be a well thought out plan. You just can't pick 5 real estate offices and start going in there. And a couple of things that I did early on that I think really helped is because when you start, you don't know a lot. I mean, you're full of energy, you're full of vinegar. You're ready to take on the world. But what I would do is I would set up, and you were just talking a minute ago about FaceTime. I would have as many seminars as I possibly could every month. And what I would do is I would bring in, I had this one MI rep in particular. His name is David Burris. I don't know if you know him.
No.
He was actually related to Linda Lawson, and David was phenomenal. When I first came in, he's just a great guy. He worked for PMI Incorporated, great speaker, and I would take him in to give the speeches. So here's rookie, didn't know a lot. It's like, Dave, could you talk about whatever the issue of the month was? And he'd come in. We'd serve breakfast, Dave would talk, and then everybody would come up and clap me on the back and say, man, that was great. I didn't really do anything, but I also didn't have to get up there, and take the heat. Being a rookie, sometimes it's tough. So I always suggest that to my loan officers. Bring somebody else in there, let them give a spiel, and then the business will come. And it always did.
What else did you do specifically to get business for yourself?
Well, one of the things that I do and I still do is on all the different holidays and like St. Patrick's Day and Valentine's Day, I'm always out there with marketing events or marketing pieces, whether it's chocolates or like for Valentine's Day, I make up these boxes, and it's got my name on it, BF Saul, and just got 4 candies in each, and I would go around and leave them on everybody's, desks. St. Patrick's Day is always a huge hit because I have this flyer. It's got this old Gaelic saying on it, and then I've got an Irish pin that's attached to it, and it says from Peter O. Cameron, and everybody. It's pretty funny. I mean, I've got some loan officers in here. I've got one in particular, and this is actually where I got the idea. And the biggest thing is that nobody in the business has their own original ideas 100% of the time. Try to take from as many loan officers you can, and figure out what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
This guy's name is Todd Marimoto, and his dad, he went out with a flyer and said Todd O'Marimoto, which is funnier than Peter O'Cameron.
That's great,
but,
sure.
So all the loan officers, I've got all the loan officers actually going out.
I like that.
But you just have to figure out what differentiates yourself from the other loan officers, and being consistent and doing things different is a must. And you can't do the same old things. And once you start feeling that you're getting into a pattern, you've got to change it up. I mean, that is very, very key.
Mm-hmm.
Do not get stale, and continue to add to your base. I mean, you're eventually going to get to a point where you've got a certain amount of agents feeding your business, but you can't sit back. You have to keep adding, whether it's, one a quarter or, whatever your production level is. You have to continue to get real estate agents to refer you business, or builders, whichever you're calling them.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of loan officers out there, that's exactly what happens. They get to that certain level where they're doing $10,000 or $15,000 a year, and they feel comfortable with a couple agents, and all of a sudden they find themselves not developing new business.
Well, and I don't know how this sounds to you, but I say to my loan officers all the time, I said, look, you might have a couple agents referring business. What if one of their husbands gets transferred? What if one of them dies? You have to think about these things,
mm-hmm.
and
sure.
You have to say, okay, hadn't really thought about that. Well, your business could be cut just like that. Right? Nobody's 100% secure on who they call on and who's sending them business. Anything can happen at any time, and if you ever lose sight of you're only as good as your last deal, you're probably going to get burned. Because once you sit back and you rest and you don't deliver, you do not deserve the business anymore. It's open to anybody that can come in there and take it. And I always view that as somebody's always trying to get me, and I will hold on to this business forever.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't sit back. You've got to, it's one thing to say go out and get new business, but don't lose the business you got.
Right.
That's crucial.
I did an interview. It's the second time I referred to it, but I thought it was interesting. It's actually someone I'm willing to bet you 100% that you know. And he had an interesting theory because he was a branch manager, and he just because of the volume and business that he doesn't get out to see his realtors as much as he used to. And he said, it's kind of interesting. He says, here I am sitting up here, and I don't get out as much as I like or as I used to. He says, I am so vulnerable. He said, anybody can go and take my business now. I mean, within 2 years, they can take it all. And he was just kind of musing over the fact that it really hadn't happened, and yet his people, were out there, and he just didn't have the time to call on them. So I think your point's well made.
Well, I've had to deal with that struggle myself, and I know exactly what he's talking about. And what you have to do is you have to change your game plan. I mean, over the course of a season and whatever sport you're playing, things change, and you have to adapt to them. And the busier you get, regardless if you're a branch manager or not, the busier you get, the less time you're getting out of your chair. So you have to figure out, from a logistical standpoint, how you're going to accomplish staying in front of the agent's face.
And how do you do it? Because with 25 loan officers working for you, and you doing the kind of volumes you have, your day, you must have to manage your day incredibly well.
Yeah, the day. I mean, from a time management standpoint, you actually have to start reading the books. You're gonna the infancy stage, when you get out of the rookie stage, and you're starting to get business, and you're feeling just great. When you start getting a lot of business, and you got to sit back and you got to start reading some books. You got to read about time management. I don't read a lot of motivational books. In that, I don't need to be motivated. I'm a motivated guy, and if you feel like you've got that, then what you have to do is you have to seek out other help. You have to seek out the advice of the people that are doing the business. Okay, what are you doing that works? Talk to as many top producers as possible so you grab ideas, you know, and change your business. Constantly look. Every day I walk in here and I go, how can I make this thing better? How can I tweak it just a little bit to be just a little bit better? And case in point, I send out customer surveys, and I got this survey back of this lady that I had a great phone call. I mean, her and I got along so well in conversations, and I got this survey back, and she rated me excellent everything. And then in the paragraph, it said, you know, other, and she put in, I was very disappointed because I never could reach Peter on the telephone.
Wow.
And I was like, wow. And it was just like the Ken Bennett story, you know, punch right in the stomach. I mean, I was just like, holy mackerel. I called her up. I said, man, I really apologize. I had no idea, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then I started thinking about my whole plan. I started thinking about my whole business. And what you have to do then is I started reading a lot of books about setting people's expectations. And what I did was I changed my whole business. I had to say, look, first time I would talk to somebody, I said, hey, I just want to let you know, I do a lot of business. I have a lot of people calling in here. I promise you, I will always return your phone call. But I just want to let you know, a lot of times I will be on the telephone. My assistant's Audra. If you just want to get, you know, something quick, you can always ask for her. I have 2 processors. I've got, you know, here's the other people that can help you if you have any questions. But I promise you, I always return the phone call. And since I changed my business a little bit, just a little tweak, I haven't had that ever written down or verbalized to me since.
Well, you know, there's a saying in the consumer industry with some of the big giants that sell, you know, various Colgate, Palmolive, and I'm trying to think of a couple of the big conglomerates, but they have a general rule that for everybody that calls in with a complaint, there's like 5 or 6 people in back of it. It was General Mills. I read this about. But for every person who writes in with a complaint, there's 23 people in back of them.
Right.
So when you get one comment like that, a lot of loan officers might dismiss it as, well, you know, just being a bit of a fluke. But that's not necessarily the way it is. There may be 23 other people that feel the same way back there.
Well, I think one of the lessons I learned early on, you know, especially from Ken, you know, you have to take criticism. I mean, you have to be able to handle it. I mean, you get rejected all day long. I mean,
the rejection business.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of how busy you get, you could be doing $200 million, you're still getting rejected. There's people you're not doing loans for, but you have to be able to take constructive criticism. And I send them all out of my loan officers, and when I get things, you know, the first reaction usually from a loan officer, I don't care what level they're at, is they get all upset. Like, whoa, slow down, let's sit down. Can we change your business? Can we make this better? Let's look at this and let's take it as a constructive criticism. And if you think you're doing it perfect, great, then don't worry about it. But if not, let's change your business. Let's make it better. And you can always make it better. There's no way your business is perfect. But I think one of the keys too, though, is when I started out early, we were one of the first companies, literally in the United States, to use laptop computers. Not competitors. I mean, I've been literally using a laptop since the 80s. And that in itself, it separated me. And I carry it wherever I go. Even as a manager now and a producer, even when I go home, I take it with me.
Mm-hmm.
Wherever I go, my laptop's with me. I'm always connected.
Does your company give a lot of support for that sort of stuff?
A huge support.
Mm-hmm.
I firmly believe if you're not connected, you can't survive in the future. Cannot happen.
I want to get back on that, but I do want to interject that, you know, Frank Saul is, as you certainly well know, is one of the legendary businessmen in the Washington metropolitan area. Not only has banks, but as a developer and philanthropist and many other things. He's a very hard taskmaster and has always been known for that. But I followed this company for probably 25 years, and they always support their people. I mean, he is very big on giving everybody the tools that you need to succeed.
Well, it's kind of interesting because he's totally amazing. I mean, he's just the guy's just.
He's a very modest person. You would never know of his philanthropy unless I'm very well networked because I'm a fifth generation Washington, and
Right.
And because of that, I know things about him that most people don't. But a very, very focused and very nice person.
Well, that's one of the reasons. I get people ask me all the time. Said, why don't you move on? Why don't you leave? But why don't you open up your own company? I get that stuff all the time.
Sure.
And one of the things that really attracts me to the company and to what's going on is it is a positive environment. He does give free rein. He does not rule it with an iron fist. He says, all right, here's parameters, work in it. If you have an idea, come to me, and let's see if we can get it rolling. He's very, very open to suggestions and change, which is exciting. I think that's very rare.
Yeah, right, exactly. And he's done it consistently since he took over from his father many years ago.
Exactly right.
His father was also a very successful person. Anyway, kind of back on track here. When you're out there dealing with realtors and your loan officers, do you instruct them and by that I mean, do you go along with them and call on offices? How do you lead?
I usually lead by the person, the loan officer. I don't treat them all the same, and I think it's an important part of management is just look at the personality type and try to figure out what they need. There are some loan officers that actually go out in the street with them because I think they need that. There's other ones that I just help them with their time management. There's other ones that I literally help with sales skills. We do a lot of role playing, and that's real important because you got to know what to expect. It sort of goes back to, cybervision, where, if you're wrestling, if you go through your whole match, and you literally envision what's going to happen, and you sleep through it during the night, by the time you walk out on that mat, you've already been there, and that's some of the things that I try to pass on to all the loan officers. Is look, if you're given a presentation, A, be prepared. Number one rule, don't wing it. Number two rule is practice it before you get in there, envision it, sleep on it, go through your whole seminar before you get there. You walk in that door, and you can just. I literally sometimes I'd be giving seminars and I'd be laughing. People go, "Why smiling?" I go, "Because I've already been here. I've already done it. I already know the questions you're going to ask me. I'm having so much fun up here. It's unbelievable. You've already been there. You've done it, and it'll happen. It's pretty powerful."
When you're out there with your loan officers, though, the ones you call in the offices, what kind of changes, not only when you're out there calling with loan officers, but yourself, what kind of changes have you seen in the last 6 or 7 years of the business with respect to realtor business?
Well, I guess the biggest change has been, more of the disclosed relationships with in-house lenders. The stopping of loan officers walking around offices. It's more of a closed society, I would say, than when I first got in the business. When I first got in the business, there was no in-house loan officers per se. There was a couple here and there. No offices were really closed. So the challenge now is you know where they are, you just can't get to them. So you have to figure out how to get to them. And breaking down those barriers is probably their number one problem right now. I would say is how to get around that front desk, or how to get around the front desk and not get tackled by the in-house guy.
Right.
Sort of, you got to you're getting double teamed as you walk in the door, but it leads to going back to yes, face to face is very important in FaceTime and all that. But if you're getting stuck, boom, boom. You've got to make the direct appointment, so you've got to be confident enough to make a direct appointment, and unfortunately you're going to get rejected trying to do that, but you got to grab their attention. So, a couple of things that you can do are you do have to give seminars. You do have to get in front of the mass, because if you sit there in front of 50 people, somebody's going to like you. You know what I mean? So somebody's going to like you. So you got to try to make a connection. And, even if you just start with one person, you can at least, that relationship might lead to 2 or 3, that might lead to 6 or 7, and you kind of spread through the connection that you made. But if you're just trying to hit it, onesies, twosies, it's going to be real tough. And a lot of times what you have to do, too, is you have to analyze who you're calling on and what you're doing, and know when to walk away, know when to say, you know what, this isn't worth my time. My time, I'm hitting a brick wall, and nothing is working. If you've exhausted, all the possibilities, whether it's seminar appointments, doing something special for the office, if you've exhausted all these, don't beat your head against the wall. There's so much business out there. Go attack something else and see if you can make a connection someplace else.
What if you expound on that just a little bit more? That's an area that is rarely covered. We always talk about the positive things you have to do. Sometimes you have to do some things that might look like a negative,
sure.
But in reality, they're a positive, being able to make a decision and go elsewhere. Just wondered if you talk about that, not just in relation to offices, but also with realtors.
Well, we do. We matter of fact, I literally have micromanaged it to the point where I know every single real estate agent in office that everybody under me is calling on, to the agent. And it's not about offices and who calls on offices. It's about relationships. And I want to know exactly the names of the people that they're calling on. We have target lists. You've got to define your business. You've got to define who you're going after. And if somebody's never going to give you business, ask somebody, does everybody like you? Does everybody you've ever met like you? If you can answer yes to that question, then you have nothing to worry about. But not everybody is going to like you. Somebody may not like you because you have blue eyes. Somebody may not like you because, they found out that I'm from New Jersey. That's case in point. Go back to
say, I'm sorry, but plus you came from the Bronx too. You got a double.
From the Bronx. It's a double whammy. And
I feel so sorry for you.
Well, I'm proud of my heritage because my dad fought and got us out of the Bronx, and I respect him for that. And but try to find people that are like you. That you can establish a relationship. And moving on doesn't mean that you failed. Not at all. It means you're just trying to find the business and where it is and where you can really thrive. And there's nothing wrong with moving on. And I tell loan officers that all the time. You have to continually change your business. And if something's not worth it, discard it and go get something that's worth it. You have to do that on a continual basis.
It sounds so elemental, but, in reality, being human beings and everything, it's a little more difficult to implement than, just a concept.
Well, here's the basics of being a loan officer. You don't want to give something up that you don't have. So if I went into a loan officer and said, you know what, I'm taking that Long and Foster office away from you, they immediately would get defensive. And I would look, I go, well, I've got the reports here. In the last year, you've done one deal. What are you giving up?
Mm-hmm.
What are you losing? How about if we go find something that you could get 10 to 20 deals a month or a year? Or a month would be great. But,
right.
10 to 20 a year. It's just a perception. You have to put it in context, and you have to be able to talk to them, too. You have to help them understand that you want them to succeed. And that's the whole goal, is you want to be successful or not. Well, you've only got one deal in the last 12 months. Do you think your time is worth this call? Are you doing everything? Have you, one of the sayings that we had this weekend is don't leave anything on the field. Do not leave anything on the field. If you can walk off the field in whatever sport you play and you haven't left anything on the field, you're successful. And that's the thing about these offices. If you've left everything out there and you've only got one deal in a year, give it up. You're probably not. Your time is better spent elsewhere.
Yeah, we all suffer from pride, and
Sure.
Of course the Greeks had a word for it, hubris, which there's no exact translation, but those are the kind of qualities that most of us kind of have. We all have a certain amount of pride, and it's hard to do it. But in terms of business and running a business and doing the best for yourself mentally, sometimes you got to give it up.
Well, I got buddies in the high tech world. I got a buddy that works for Cisco. He's one of their top managers in the commercial side, and he goes, Pete, Cisco is a great company.
Yeah, fabulous.
They're unbelievable. He goes, let me tell you something. He goes, their accounts I can't get into. There are accounts my guys can't get into because they're using Nortel. You know, I mean, here's Cisco. You're the biggest, you're the baddest, and it's the same thing. Whether it's mortgages or routers, his guys, he sends new guys in is what he does, and it's kind of what I do. I mean, with different accounts, I try new loan officers, try to mix it up a little bit. But, sometimes you're just beating your head against the wall. There's a relationship there, and you have to respect that relationship. You have to respect it, because if you don't understand it and respect it, you can't go after it. You have to understand the relationship and try to figure out how to break it down. But is it worth it for a new loan officer, to go about it that way? Probably not. You need to go after business that you can get.
I think there's a valuable lesson right there for the listeners out there that, sometimes you'll have managers that'll take these rookies and send them out beating their heads against people who are very high producers, where sometimes you've got to drop down a notch where you have the chance to establish a relationship.
Well, and you have to establish a relationship that you can grow together. And I look at some of the agents that I work with now. We grew up together. It's fun. I look at them. I go, remember when? And we kind of just look at each other and go, yeah, man, we did it. We grew together. And it's like any relationship, whether you're married or you got buddies. Y'all grow together in some way. And about any relationship, you try not to grow apart. And that's part of the business relationship is you grow together. They become successful. Well, guess what? I'm going to be successful because I'm growing with them.
When it comes to your loan officers, what about training? How do you feel about training in general and in particular?
Well, training's a must. We have so much training going on. I'm amazed at the loan officers coming in today versus when I came in. It is far more complex today, yet there are many more tools available to you to succeed. So it's sort of a trade-off. There's a lot more to know, but yet you do have more help. We do company training. I do office training here in general. We have a meeting once a week where we do go over things. Because one of the things that I've noticed, and I've switched my meetings around a lot. We now gear more towards sales, and let's go over what's happened in the past week, because you can really learn from the experiences of the other loan officers of what they're dealing with out on the street. And you have to continually talk to the top producers and start rubbing shoulders with them. You've got to run with the stallions, and when you get around it, it just becomes infectious. But you also learn a lot. I mean, I learn something in here almost every day. I mean, I have tremendous producers here, and we literally go walk up and down the hallway going, hey, have you ever run into this? And just get as many ideas and feedback as you can.
That's a great office atmosphere to have, where people, some offices out there, having worked for some, and maybe you did many years ago, where there's almost a little bit of intimidation and fear of the branch manager. They don't have open door policies. They're not open to questions and help like that. And here you're kind of seeing the reverse of that situation, where you're open, you have an open door policy, and maybe that's a backhanded compliment, but I think also in the interview that is coming out loud and clear that to be a successful manager, you have to step up to the plate yourself.
Well, you have to, and it's a trade-off on your own personal production, and you have to. It's got to be a non-selfish type of situation. I have to drop whatever I'm doing and help the person that's in front of me, whatever it may be. And you know what? It's not just helping the rookie loan officers. It could be my top producer sitting in here with a problem. They're equal weight. Obviously the top producer is bringing more to the table here, but it's still a problem, and you still have to attack it on either one, whether it's the rookie or the top guy. You can't have an A and a B team. You have to have the whole team working together. And I have a lot of non-selfish loan officers too that do help rookies also. We've got a couple that are mentoring some rookies. And we trade office services. Like I'll have a top producer help a rookie, and what they'll do is they'll ride with them. They'll help them with a marketing plan. But as a trade-off, this loan officer will perform some duties for them, like whether it's faxing out rate sheets, preparing flyers, organizing a loan together. It'll be a trade-off, and it's a good system, and it lets a loan officer literally rub shoulders with a top producer.
You know what? You're the first person to bring that up as a management tool in all the interviews, and not that others don't do it. You're the first one to articulate it. I wondered, as we're getting near the end of our time, I wondered if you'd expound on that for a little bit. I like that concept, and I think that people out there listening are going to like it a lot too.
Well, I actually got I got the idea back when I was in Manassas and I was running the office. One of my best friends was telling me about this job he was going to take, and I said, well, that doesn't sound great. Being me, I said, that doesn't sound great. I go, why don't you come work for me? And he said, okay. And literally what I was trying to figure out, I was actually very nervous because he's literally one of my best friends. And I was nervous yet excited at the same time because I knew he'd succeed. But what we worked out was, I said, look, why don't you sit in my office? I had kind of a big office back then. I'd moved myself into the conference room because I had filled up the other offices with loan officers. I said, why don't you sit in my office? I said, this way, and the way I thought about it originally was you can hear me thinking, I'm going to teach you everything, you can hear me. But what ended up happening was we traded services. And I ended up getting equally as much out of it as he did. So we started it, and we just called it the mentoring program. And, not only was he listening to me on the telephone, but I was listening to him. And it got me to think a lot. And then we started doing, flyers together, ideas, brainstorming back and forth. And it just led into, wow, this is not only beneficial for the rookie, it's also beneficial to the seasoned veteran who sometimes thinks they know it all. They can learn even from the rookie.
I think that's great, and I think this is a real good high point to kind of end this interview. I want to thank you so much for taking your time today to talk to our listeners out there. I can't even begin to list all the value-added things that you've brought up. Most of them new or articulated in a different, with a different perspective, and I think that this is certainly one of the more valuable interviews that I've done, and it's going to resonate out there, I think, in the mortgage community. So I wanted to thank you, Peter, and have a great day, and we'll keep in touch.
You're very welcome.